We continue now at the top of Daf Samach Zayin Amud Beis in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 67b. And the previous Amud Ula said, from where can I prove that Yush is not Kona when it comes to Gazela, when it comes to stealing? We can prove it from the Pasuk. The Pasuk says, would you bring as a carbon an animal that was lame or that was stolen? And we can compare the two terms in the Pasuk. Just like an animal that is a Piseach, there's no solution, there's no way that you could bring it as a carbon. Af Gazel, so too when the Pasuk says that you can't bring a Gazel as a carbon, the less leitakanta, there is no solution. Loshna lifnei yish, veloshna achar yish. It doesn't matter before yish, it doesn't matter after yish. Even if the original owner gave up hope, you cannot bring it as a carbon, because again, it seems, as Ula is saying, yish is not kona. Rava Amar Rava says mehacha from here, from a different pasuk. The pasuk says karbano, it says his carbon, velo hagazel, and it means to say his carbon. It can't be a stolen carbon. Now emas. Now at what point in time? When are we saying? Was it before Yush or after Yush? Ilema lifnei Yush. If we're talking about it stolen and before Yush, so pshit, that's obvious. Of course he can't bring it as a carbon. Lama likra. What do we need a pasuk for? Of course it's not even his animal. Elalav, rather is it not la'achar Yush? We're talking about even after Yush, he's not able to bring it as a carbon. Ushmamina. Yush lo kani shvamina. You see from here that Yush is not kona, and the Gemara says indeed we see that that is the case. But the Gemara says v'harava hu da'amar de gazal carbon de chavri. But Rava said we're not talking over here where an animal was stolen and then the person was trying to be makdish it. We're talking over here where the animal that was stolen actually already was a carbon, so it had nothing to do with the issue of Yush. And so the Gemara says, Iba Yisayim, if you want, I could say Hadarbe, that Rava retracted from that explanation. V'iba Yisayim, and if you want, I could say Chad Minai, one of these statements, Rav Papa Amra, was actually said by Rav Papa. And we will take a look at the Mosef Rashi here. These are Rashis from other Mesechtes. There's no Rashi here on what we just read. Rashi says in Meseches Sukkah, Af Gazel, that's going again on the Pasuk in Malachi, that we're comparing the stolen animal as a carbon to the lame animal. Yalfinan minod de'ein lo takana, stolen animal also, there's no solution, la'achar zman, even after some time goes by. Ve'afilu b'yush, even if there's yush, t'shaminon le lamari d'miyayish, that even if we heard the owner give up hope, v'yomer vayle lechisarn kis, he said, woe is to the loss of money. Still, apparently, again, achar yush, there is no kinyan. That was the source of Ula from the Pasuk in Malachi. And Rava said it's from the Pasuk in Vayikra of Karbano im Ola Karbano. The Pasuk says im Ola Karbano. Velo Hagazel, we understand that to mean he has to bring his carbon, not a stolen animal, as a carbon. The Gazel lav l'ratzanasi, because again, a Gazel is not going to be accepted. An animal that's stolen won't be accepted as a carbon. Because al Gadaydach, the Gazel behemas chulin v'aisi. This is Rashi earlier. Rashi in Daf Samach Vavam Mebei says, right now, the Gemara thinks he stole an animal that was not consecrated. It was chulin. It wasn't yet made hektish. And now the Gazlan wants to make it hektish, and that's why the Gemara says, well, when is that talking about? Before Yish, of course he can't make it hektish, it's not his animal. So then it must be after Yish. You see that Yish is not Kona. And then the Gemara said, no, it could be. Why are we bringing this as a proof? But Rava before interpreted it totally differently. He said the Gazal carbon de Chavre. He said that the case over here is not when the person steals an animal that's chulin. It's talking about when he steals an animal that was already made into a carbon by the person he stole it from. Shehikdish Chaveiro. His friend is the one that sanctified the animal. Uliolam lifnei Yish. And then we could say we're talking about before Yish. And it's still necessary to teach us that the carbon's not going to be accepted at all, even for the original owners, even though there was no yish whatsoever. Maybe you would say it should work for the original owners. That could be the chiddush. Over here, again, it would have no proof. It would bring no proof in terms of whether yish is kona or not, according to what Rava said, that it's gazel carbon the chavre. And Rashi had another explanation also, lishnachrin, another way to understand what it means that he stole the carbon of his friend. So what are we talking about that he can't bring that as a carbon? The gazel carbon the chavre, he stole the carbon of his friend. You could say there, in that particular situation, even after Yish won't be Kona, the carbon ain't no nigzal, because it could be a carbon is not nigzal. A carbon cannot be stolen. Because by a carbon specifically, wherever it is, it's under the authority of the Beis HaMikdash, and so therefore that's an exception. Again, it wouldn't be a proof. So how is Rava bringing a proof here from Karbano v'lo hagazel if we're talking about gazel carbon the chavre? And again, the Gemara gave two answers. Either Rava retracted, or it could be that Rava didn't make both of these statements. Maybe one of the statements was made by Rav Papa. And we will take a look at the Bach as well. Rav Papa Amra, the Gemara said that one of the statements was made by Rav Papa. Why pick Rav Papa? Near Be'enai Mishum de Molach Basar Abai v'Rava. The Bach says it's because he actually took over after Abai and Rava, so that's why the Gemara is saying maybe he made one of the two statements. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, Umidas tashlumi arba v'chamisha v'chulu. It said that when it comes to the payment of 4 or 5 times the amount, that applies only to a shor and seh, doesn't apply to other animals. And the Gemara says, V'yamai, why is that the case? Neiliv shor mishavis. We should learn out, it says shor over here in the pasuk when it's talking about paying 4 or 5 times the amount by a stolen shor. And it also talks about resting one's animals on Shabbos, and it says the word shor there. Malahalan chayev va'of kayotze. And just like over there, wild animals, meaning undomesticated animals, and fowl, birds as well, it's all the same. It's not limited to shor. Afkan, so too over here when it comes to the tashlumi arba v'chamisha, chayev va'of kayotze ben. Let's say that when it comes to wild animals and birds as well, the halacha should be the same. We should learn that out from the fact that it says shor by Shabbos as well. And the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Amar Krutz, because the pasuk says shor vaseh, shnei pa'amim. In the pasuk, it actually says the words shor vaseh 2 times, and from the fact that it says it in extra time, shor vaseh in midi achrina lo. So we understand that it applies only to a shor vaseh and not to any other animals. And we'll read the full pasuk. Ki yignov ish shor oseh. It says a person steals a shor or a seh, utavacho o mecharo, and then he slaughters it or he sells it. Chamisha vakar yishalim tachas hashor. It says you pay 5 bakar for the shor. So there it says shor again. V'yar batzon tachas haseh. And you pay 4 sheep instead of the seh. And so the fact that it repeated it says shor and seh a second time, we're learning from that it applies to shor vaseh and it doesn't apply to other animals. And the Gemara continues, Amri, they said as follows, the sages said as follows, Hai miyaser, so which one is extra? Is the first shor or seh in the pasuk extra, or is the last shor of a seh in the pasuk extra? Ilema shor v'seh the seifa miyaser. If you're going to say that the shor and seh at the end of the pasuk is extra, the nichtov rachmana, because the pasuk could have just written ki yignov shor oseh utavacho umecharo. If a person steals a shor or seh and slaughters or sells it, chamisha bakar yishalim tachtov. It could have said 5 bakar instead of the shor. V'yar batzon tachtov, and then 4 tzon, 4 sheep instead of it. It didn't need to say tachas hashor. It didn't need to say tachas haseh. But the Gemara says, "Ikasav Rachmana Hachi." But if the pasuk would have written it that way, so it would have been confusing. Hava Amina boy shalume tisha l'chalechad vechad. I might have thought that you have to pay 9 animals for each one. Maybe it means to say if he steals the shor or tvach and he slaughters it, he's got to pay back 5 bakar and he's got to pay back 4 tzon. But the Gemara says, if you're going to say, Haksiv Tachtov, maybe you'll say nobody would think that, because it says Tachtov twice. It says, Chamisha Bakar Yishalim Tachtov, or it would have said it twice. Chamisha Bakar Yishalim Tachtov, V'yar Batzon Tachtov. So everybody would understand that the fact that it says it twice indicates that you're not paying 9 animals. As the Gemara says, Chad Tachtov Miyaser, that one of the Tachtovs is extra, and so it's clear that you're not paying 9 animals, but that's not true either. Hahumi Boile L'Drosha Achrina, because the fact that it's repeating it, and it says Tachtov, or in other words, it says shor and seh, that repetition teaches us a different drasha. Titania, because we learned in a brisa, Yachal Gonav shor shava moneh. I might think if somebody steals a shor and it's worth a moneh, Yishalim Tachtov Negidin, that he could pay back. We have to say that he pays back 5 times the amount, but maybe it could be Negidin, meaning it could be inferior, thin animals. Talmud Lomar Tachtov. That's why the pasuk says Tachtov. It doesn't say Tachtov, but it says Tachas Ashur, and it also says Tachas Aseh. Why does it say that repetition? It's saying that it has to be the same kind of animal. So therefore it's not extra. The second Tachtov would not be extra. And if the second Tachtov is not extra, again, we're back to what we're saying, that maybe I would have thought it's 9 animals. And so therefore we need the shor vaseh of the seifa to understand that it's not 9 animals, but rather you're paying for the shor 5 animals, 5 shors, and you're paying for the seh 4 animals, 4 sehs. And so the Gemara says, Ella rather shor vaseh dereisha miyusar. Maybe the shor and the seh in the beginning of the pasuk are extra. The nichtov rachmana, because the pasuk could have written ki yignov ishu tavacho mecharo. A person steals and slaughters and sells. Chamisha bakar yishalim tachas hashor, 5 bakar for the shor. V'yar batzon tachas haseh, and 4 tzon for the seh. And you would have understood, obviously, the person stole a shor or stole a seh. And so therefore the shor and seh in the beginning of the pasuk seem to be extra. The Gemara says, no, because of Rachmana Hachi, had the pasuk written that, had it not written shor and seh in the beginning, Havamina Adagonev Trey, I might have thought like this. Maybe you have to steal both of the animals, V'tavachluhu, and then you have to slaughter both of the animals in order to have this fine. But the Gemara says, you wouldn't have thought that. Utavacho ksiv l'chad. It says utavacho in singular. He slaughters it. No one would have thought you have to slaughter both of them. But the Gemara says, Ve'ema Adagonev Tarvayu Mezavinlu. But maybe I would have thought that you have to steal both of them and sell them in order to have this fine. Again, the Gemara says, Umacharo ksiv l'chad. It says Umacharo in singular. It's only one of them. Nobody would have thought that. But the Gemara says, Ve'ema havamina, but I might have said, havamina ad the gun of trey, v'tavachad mazavin chad. Maybe I would think you have to steal both animals and slaughter one and sell one. The Gemara says you wouldn't have thought that either. O mecharo ksiv, it says or he sells it. It doesn't say and he sells it. But the Gemara still says v'yakati, but still hava mina ad the gun of tarvayu. I might have thought that you have to steal both of them. V'tav chad u'meshayir chad, and slaughter one and leave one aside. O mazvin chad u'meshayir chad, or sell one and leave one aside. And so the Gemara says ela shor de seifa v'sed de reisha miyasa. Rather, you're right. The shor and sed in the reisha and the shor and sed in the seifa are not extra, but rather one animal in each is extra. The shor at the end is extra, and the sed and the reisha in the beginning of the pasuk is extra. Why? To nichtov rachmana keyiganov ish shor utavacho mecharo. It could have said that a person steals a shor, sells it and slaughters it or sells it. Chamisha bakar yishalim tachtov. You pay 5 bakar for it. V'arbatzo and tachas hasen. You pay 4 sheep if it's talking about a seh, if it's instead of a seh. That could have been written. So shor de seifa v'sed de reisha lamali. Why does it need to say the word shor at the end of the pasuk? Why does it need to say sed at the beginning of the pasuk? Those are extra. Shma mina shor v'se'in midi achrina lo. You see from this that yes, it applies to a shor and a seh. It doesn't apply to any other animals. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, "Ein hagonev achar haganev mishalem tashlumei kefil." If a ganev steals it from another ganev, he doesn't pay the kefil payment. He doesn't pay 2 times the amount. And the Gemara says, "Amar Rav." Rav says, "Lo shanu ela lifnei yish." This is only true before the original owner gave up hope. Aval achar yish, but if it's after the original owner gave up hope, kano ganev rishon. So then the first ganev actually acquires the item. The ganev sheni mishalem tashlumei kefil, the ganev rishon, and therefore the second ganev has to pay kefil to the ganev rishon. Of course, the ganev Rishon has to pay money to the original owner, but now that the second Ganev stole it from the first Ganev, he now has to pay Kefel to the Ganev Rishon. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Sheshes says, Amina kinayim v'shachiv Rav. I think that Rav, when he was dozing off, Amar lahashmayit, he said this halacha. The Tanya, because we learned in a brisa, Amar Rabbi Akiva says, Mibnei ma amra Torah. Why does the Torah say, Tavach umachar mishalim tashlumi arba v'chamisha, that if a person slaughters or sells the animal, he has to pay 4 or 5 times the amount? Mipnei shenishtarish b'chet, because now he's taking that sin and he's taking the sin even further. And so the Gemara says, Amos, when are we talking about? What's the context over here? Ilema lifnei Yush, if we're talking about before Yush. And Rashi explains, Shenishtarish means Asa Sharash, and he made the sin take root. Kilomar Nischazik B'chet, he strengthened the sin. Shekano Mahanu Maisav, because now he acquired it, and his deeds led to some benefit. He slaughtered the animal, he sold the animal. And so what are we talking about over here? Ilema lifnei Yush Machur, if we're talking about that he sold it before the Yush, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Ches Amud Aleph.